Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
All right, thank you for tuning in. 25 minutes before 11 o'clock. You know, when I see you, Robin, looking at the pictures that your son sends you of your new grandson,
yes,
I see pure love. I mean, there's no question in my mind that you love that little baby.
Oh, yeah. He's 4 months old yesterday.
And I bet it just tears you up that he's 1,100 miles away, right?
Yes, it does.
But it is that love that I've known in many people for their children, for their parents, for their grandparents, and yet you meet people all the time. You know people, not just meet people, but you know people. Maybe you are somebody who had a struggle with that. You know, love wasn't necessarily the same for you as it might have been for, like, Robin and her family. I mean, Robin is an amazing example of probably the way we should all be loving our family, especially the way you look at that little boy. Holy mackerel. That's awesome. It really is. It's really beautiful.
I'm holding him with my eyes.
So let's talk about this a little bit with our guest. Our guest is Jane Pollak. She's on the phone. She has a #1 book. It's called Too Much of Not Enough. It is a memoir. She, according to this, was raised by a mother who was emotionally unavailable. She's an artist. She survived through a 12-step recovery program. Well, that's good. She's a world traveler. See, I want to see. I'm jealous from that, right? Too much of not enough. Jane Pollak, good morning. It's an honor to have you on our show. Good morning.
Thank you so much, Larry. It's great to be here.
So where are you? Where are you calling from?
New York City.
Where? Where in the city?
I'm in Washington Heights.
Really?
Right by the bridge.
Oh my gosh!
Yes. You know the city well?
Yeah. We were just looking at that area the other day. I can't remember. There was some guy on.
Some guy.
Yeah, he writes. He does these little videos where he walks around, and I said to Robert, this is an area of the city I don't really know that well, so I kind of learned it.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah,
We're
it is.
By the cloisters are up here.
The cloisters.
In Fort Tryon
Yes.
Park. Yes, it's magnificent. Yes.
Oh my gosh, that is a beautiful area. This time of year, right? Especially.
All year, and the cloisters, for not, as long as things are blooming, they have something different going on in the gardens. It's quite beautiful.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'll be up.
The Hudson River view is spectacular.
Yeah. Robin, we got to go. Oh, she's going to go up in June, so she'll be there.
Yeah.
Her son lives right on the other side of the river.
In Jersey.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or Rockland County. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what county. He lives in a town called Clifton, right? Or Clifton. Yeah.
Oh,
So-
I know Clifton, New Jersey.
So tell me about yourself. The book is your memoir, right?
Yes.
And I like the fact that it's categorized as an instructive memoir. What does that mean?
Well, I was unhappy in many aspects of my life, so I talk about how I got out of that unhappiness, and so anybody reading it can say, oh, if I do that, I can also move away from the unhappiness that I feel. So it's not like, number one, you do this, number two, you do that, but as you mentioned, you referenced 12-step recovery. What you say when you pick somebody to sponsor you, somebody to be there for you, you say you pick someone who has what you want. So you see in people a maturity, a level of acceptance, and so, if people want that, then, and they say if you want what they have, do what they do. So I started following people's example that, I really liked what they had, a calm about themselves, an inner strength that I definitely did not have as, growing up, or I didn't have a model for that, sadly, but, that doesn't mean you can't get it.
So let's make sure that any uncertainties we have can be figured out first. Did you have any substance abuse issues?
Sugar.
Sugar, I got that one, Robin.
Yeah, I tell you, it's a killer. It's a killer, and it's, socially very acceptable. So it's like, let's go out for ice cream, until I got to the point where the next day I would be, or actually like 2 hours later, I'd be incredibly depressed and hating everything in my life. And I began to associate it. It's like, and cravings for it. As a friend of mine said, a pint of Haagen-Dazs never spent a night in my house. If it was there, I had to have it.
Me too. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, well,
You're like, we're brethren already, or whatever they call it. So,
yes,
okay. So far, you sound normal. So far.
Yes. It all passed for normal, and it's like, in some of the literature, they say we guess at what normal is. You think that what happens inside your house is what happens inside everybody's house. And we were what I call a looking good family. We were well educated, we were well dressed, our property was well managed.
Where did you grow
we
up?
Went to colleges. I grew up in White Plains.
Okay.
So
okay.
of New York City.
Uh-huh.
And and we had everything, but there was something, as I heard in the rooms, it looks good, but it feels bad. And I had this inner sadness that I didn't even know I had. I just thought everybody felt that way. Until later in life when I thought, oh, this is what it's like to be loved. This is what it feels like to be seen and accepted and heard. And I really hadn't experienced that.
Did you guys have money?
We were, I would say, upper middle class. So
Okay.
we had, definitely a privileged upbringing, definitely.
So
It wasn't lavish, wasn't, at the time it was Cadillacs,
Correct, yeah.
regular cars. But we had, 2-car family. We all went to college. My parents paid for it.
Did your mom and dad
affluent.
spend a lot of time at their jobs? Is that part of it?
My mother was a stay-at-home mom, and then when my younger brother, he's 7 years younger, went to kindergarten, she began a business of party planning. So she, because she was very attached to us, so that was very helpful. But she didn't really make money at it, and I've been entrepreneurial since 1980. And my mother was a role model in terms of creativity and inventiveness, but she would say to clients, "Pay me whatever you think it's worth." So that was she was
Wow.
an example economically. I know.
We can relate to that.
Yeah, whatever.
Well, there you go. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I remember she had a gold brooch. It was a horse, and she said, "Oh, this was for the so-and-so wedding or bat mitzvah or something."
Did a whole bar mitzvah for? Oh my gosh.
For a horse.
Oh my
a gold
gosh.
horse.
Oh my gosh.
But
Were you
she
old
didn't
enough?
know how to ask.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when did you realize that that's? So she sounds sweet. Actually, she sounds like a sweet lady.
Did you read the book?
No.
I did.
She was very invasive. Yes, very invasive. So one example was when I was pregnant with my second child, I wanted to have a midwife deliver the baby. And this was, becoming very popular. He was born in 1978, and midwives were becoming very popular, and she thought it was insanity, and she talked about friends of theirs who were having a home birth, and I thought, well, that's really what I wanted, but I was too afraid to do a home birth, so a midwife assistant in the hospital seemed great to me, and so, it was getting close to my due date, and I asked about the family who was having the home birth, and she said, "Didn't I tell you?" I said, "What?" She said, "Not only did the baby die, but the mother died too." I was
Wow.
like, "Oh my God."
Was that true?
That's terrible. No.
No.
So my father came in. I said, "Dad, I'm so sorry about that baby." And he said, "Where'd you hear that?" I said, "Mom."
Oh
told me."
my gosh.
She said-
Okay, never
she said,
mind.
I made it up. I made it up.
Yeah.
Oh, my
she went to
gosh.
get her
What
way.
a counselor said to me was she will do anything
I
to
gotcha.
get what she wants. So sweet in some ways and overbearing and demanding and unrealistic in others and
Is
not
she-
willing to learn.
Is she still with us?
No, she passed away in 2005.
How did?
And,
I hate to ask something super personal, but how did that make you feel when she passes?
relieved.
Relieved.
Okay.
Yeah. Her,
Wow.
her final words to us, she had an episode and she was in the hospital in intensive care, and the doctors were at the head of the bed talking to her, and my sisters and I were at the foot of the bed talking to each other, and her last words to us were, "Shut up." So that just gives you an idea of, she didn't go out gracefully. She was in a coma for a week, and I was able to, crawl into bed with her and tell her that I loved her, that I thanked her, and I forgave her. And so I was at peace with that, but I don't miss her because, all I can associate with our relationship was being criticized.
Oh my gosh.
And
Okay, I'm
that's
so sorry.
very sad, yeah.
What about your dad? What was your dad like?
He, kind of a gentle man, but very emotionally unavailable. I think it was the times. I don't, let me tell you that I don't think that any of this was intentional. They never said, let us, rub our hands together and see what misery we can bring to our children. It was the best they could do. They didn't have role models. They didn't know how to do it any better. And sadly, when I said to my mother, I feel badly when she said, "I'll never change. I'm never changing. I've been a terrible mother," and then I would say, "No, you haven't," and I was caretaking her, and then I had to just take a break, and there was one point when she turned 80 where I took a year away from her because it was intolerable to me to be, to have that barrage of scrutiny and criticism, and I was in my 40s, I didn't need that anymore.
You were you had a roadmap for your life that you were having for yourself, and you were also writing letters to God.
Yes, I began, I think I did that even before I joined the 12-step community, where that's kind of common practice. But I was so desperate. It was like, it's interesting. Before I got into recovery, I had been in an 8-year friendship with a woman that was completely unsatisfying. I wanted more than she could give, and I was demanding. I mean, I had no recovery and really no tools. And so I was really demanding, and I thought, dear God, if there were only a room full of people where I could go with my issues, because they had all boiled down to this one relationship, I would save everything for her, because she gave me exquisite attention, which my mother was never able to do. That was what I was looking for. And so I said, if only there were a room full of people where I could go, and then I could come to this friendship and just have fun. And two or 3 months later, somebody told me about this 12-step meeting, and it was the answer to my prayers. And then I actually have a God jar where I just put every wish and desire. And then, 3 months later, it's like, oh, he took care of that. Okay, that one's taken care of, So I have a higher power to turn to on a regular basis.
Oh, that is
so
cool. I love that story.
It's a wonderful concept.
So can I ask why you were referred to a 12-step program when it was all emotional? Usually we hear about 12-step programs for alcohol or some kind of a drug.
Well, the one I joined was for, there's the disease of codependency. I call it the relationship program. That we use other people to fill what they call a God-sized. I was using other people, and it wasn't working. It really wasn't working. And I think that actually codependency underlies most addiction, that we fill ourselves up either with people or substances to fill that hole. And mine, whenever I was with this friend, I wasn't hungry, I wasn't thirsty, I didn't even crave sugar, because I felt so, it was a high. And I think that's, something that's not undervalued. It isn't talked about a lot in recovery. Well, it is, because it is really it's all about relationships. They say the opposite of addiction is connection. And so when we're connecting, we don't need to fill ourselves up with other substances, whether it's TV or pot or alcohol or shopping or sugar. We feel connected.
And I
feel connected when we're seen. What you were saying about your grandson, it's you're eyeballing this child and saying, here's a connection. And I don't think I got that. I didn't get that. Let me be clear. I didn't get that.
But in the, like the first 2/3 of your life, you were very focused on making other people happy, and you just had put yourself in the background.
It's classic symptoms of this, these isms are people-pleasing, enabling, helping others, putting everybody else first, never saying no. Those were all the things, and that got me to a low point, and my body started to rebel. It was like, you can't do this anymore. And so I started to shut down. I developed, sciatica, and I was flat on my back, so I couldn't. The universe, they say God meets you at your weakest point, and so there I was flat on my back, and I couldn't go for the walks with my friend, and I couldn't schlep my kids around, and, I couldn't do the things that I normally made me acceptable. And that's when you begin to realize I'm acceptable whether or not I do those things.
How long ago was the 12-step program?
I continued to go. I started in August of 89.
Oh, okay. So 89.
So I'm close to 30 years. It's something, the more I go, the more I enjoy it, the more I learn. It's not something that you graduate from. It's something that is, I'm a lifer. And, I go to meetings, and it's my social life. And to people who don't understand it, that might sound weird. But here, I go for an hour a day.
No, it sounds normal. It sounds like it's like anything. You have to keep doing it, right?
I'm fueled. I'm fueled by it, and it's not addictive because I can live without it. But it fuels me. It gives me a chance. I might share for 2 or 3 minutes at a meeting, but I feel seen, heard, and acknowledged, and my voice is out in the universe. I just kept everything in for the first 40 years of my life, except for this one friend. And if she wasn't available, I don't know where it went.
Can we ask about your marriage?
Yeah. So I was married to a very nice man. He was an adult child of alcoholic parents. When I first met him, he was on the phone. We were at Columbia Teachers College, Columbia University, and this was 1971. There was a term called sitting bells. You would answer the phone because there weren't, young people will never understand this, but there were not phones in every room.
Right.
There were
Right.
So a phone would ring in the hall, and then you would connect up to somebody's room. And so to earn extra money, he would sit bells. And one night, as he was sitting bells, he was on the phone, and he's with his father, and covers the receiver, and he says, "He's drunk," And, and he just had this expression on his face, and he's like, yeah, Dad, I love you too. And I said, he tells you he loves you? I didn't even care if he was drunk. It just seemed like his father was mushy, whereas my father was just, my father never said, I love you. Never.
I tell my son I love him all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm not drunk.
Don't stop.
No,
So he grew up with, and in an alcoholic family, children, the strongest characteristic of an alcoholic family is denial. So it's like, they're not drunk. They don't, it's normal. They drink normally. And
so you met him because he told you you had a phone call?
No, we lived in the same dorm at Teachers College.
Oh, I see.
And we were in the same English class, and, he had a crush on me. And it was fun. He was funny. He was smart. He helped me understand literature. He became an English teacher. And, for a few years until our first child was born, we just had fun. And, his biggest compliment to me was, you are such a good audience. And,
how was he? Was he a good audience?
No. What that meant, it was all about him.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I hear that, yeah.
He was not. And, I had to, in therapy, one of the first things I had to do was say, could you let me finish my sentences? And he said, I'm going to have to be so careful now.
Wow.
Pretty simple request, but for me it was monumental.
Mm-hmm.
I was the one of 4 children, and I couldn't get a word. I have a very extroverted older sister. So at the dinner table, I had to hone my thoughts really carefully, and then I would blurt something out. But I was never called on. I wasn't recognized. I was in the classically the lost child. So I was very quiet. But I was observing everything. And Tom Wolfe writes in Bonfire of the Vanities, I had my revolver of resentment, and I go, pow, 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 and knock you out with my criticism and resentment.
And then through your therapy, you said that you found out that he just spilled his guts and said he just was seeing another person.
That was 38 years into the marriage.
Yeah, we were
married a very long time. He didn't spill his guts. He read a memo.
He read a memo.
Yeah.
He read a memo, and it said, he's very passive, and he said, a woman in Maine has become very important to me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my gosh.
He never said to me, Jane, can we talk? I have this thing. I'm looking outside the marriage. None of that. He didn't own any of it. And so, he's with her now. They're not married, but, he's been living with her for 8 years, and I don't, we say in recovery that God does for us what we couldn't do for ourselves. I couldn't leave the marriage. It had become my higher power. I thought that being married all those years was a status symbol. It was. The culture, reveres marriage. And so here I am at 62, 8 years ago as a single woman, and I was like, wow. And so really the memoir is about the whole reinvention, but you have to understand where I came from to understand what the reinvention looks like.
And it explains why you're number 1 in the divorce category on Amazon. So do you, did you go through the what am I trying to say when somebody dies? Like,
mourning?
Grief.
Yeah, like, did you have that grief period after the divorce? Oh, you did?
Absolutely. Oh my God, yes. And it was not as much for my ex as it was for the status of being a married woman, which tells you a lot.
Oh, there you go.
No, that's everything.
Relatable.
I do understand that. Yeah, yeah.
It was like, who am I if I'm not married? And I had gone through empty nesting. And a lot of women go through that when their children graduate and go off to, college or beyond. And it's like, who am I if I'm not a mother? And I had a career, but it's still, the energy of the household and the glue in our marriage was really our children, and talking about them. And my youngest went to Japan, so, there was nothing, and my older one went to Australia after she graduated. My son moved up to Boston. We were in Connecticut. So, the good news is that they were very independent and very well formed, and I am very happy about that. My ex was a very good dad. I think I was a remarkable mother, to have them not be needy. But we were all devastated by the breakup of the family unit.
Do you consciously try to raise your children, or have you consciously tried to raise your children, so the in the wake of the way your parents raised you isn't repeated?
Oh, I consciously did things very differently. I gazed at my children. I held them in my arms. I breastfed them for 3 years each. They were very attached and they all went to a community cooperative nursery school, a magnet elementary school. So they were shepherded through the first 12 years of their life. And then I thought, you know what, my son complained that I wasn't going to Little League games. I thought, I think, who was it who said, give me a child for the first 6 years of their life, and then you can have them for the rest of, the formative years are those first 6 years.
That's right.
And even 3 years. And, every morsel that went into their mouths, every, any piece of literature that they read, any, thing that they viewed was, vetted by me.
That's right.
Very consciously.
Yeah.
And we were together. I almost never had a babysitter, so they also had to pick up my codependency. So it's not like they're, la-di-da, life is all perfect. They have their own issues, but they're fantastic parents. They're self-supporting through their own devices. They do very well for themselves. They're two of them are in long-term marriage, 10 and 12, 11-year marriages, and my younger daughter's getting married this summer. So they had a fairly healthy model, but there's neurosis in everybody. So, everybody's got their stuff. I didn't do a perfect job, but I deeply loved them, and they knew they were loved. And that's something that I can't say that I knew.
Well,
and
your
my
story...
mother said, you know that I love you. It's like, that's different.
Well, your story truly inspires others because you are an artist, and you look for everything unique in life, and that's what I took away as a reader, that everybody should try to live each day of their life as a blank canvas and then just fill it up with color. And you really are expressing that in your book.
Thank you. And the hallmark of recovery is one day at a time. That's all we have. We are not promised anything.
We have, that's right.
And so to do our best today and give what we can.
Jane, tell us about your writing. Have you always been a writer?
I have written 3 books. This is by far the most intimate, but my career was in art. And so when people say, do you miss the art? I did Ukrainian Easter eggs for 30 years and had a national reputation, was on the Today Show. Steve Jobs bought an egg. My eggs were at the White House, the Smithsonian. It was very exciting. I was in the media very, very often. And then people say, do you miss it? It's like I find writing incredibly creative. And I also coach women entrepreneurs, and that's very creative, too. So I don't miss the hands-on. My writing practice, I blog regularly. When I was writing the book, I joined a writer's room, and I would write 8 to 10 hours a week. And then I took myself on a couple of writing retreats as well. But it was a 5-year process. It was not, I didn't sit down to write it, and then it was done. So
has the writing been a way to read or newly discover yourself or discover something new about yourself, maybe?
Very much so. It's funny, in our family, we were labeled, my older sister was, you're the writer, Jane's the artist, Barbara's the pretty one, Andy's the funny one. And so I didn't even think I could be the writer.
You can be the funny one, too.
I know. Now
right?
I can be anything. But we were labeled and really boxed into something. And I did have a very successful art career. My older sister became a literary agent. So, those things are formative. But now I am claiming the slot as writer, and we could all be writers. My brother is a fantastic writer. So, and I love to write. It is very revealing, and it's challenging, too. That blank page is, like a blank canvas.
And you're living not too far from where Edgar Allan Poe lived. Just across the Harlem, right across the Harlem River.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, but he didn't make much money.
I didn't know that.
I think he got $10 for the Raven. Yeah, you don't want to follow in issues.
Yeah. But he stuck it out with his wife when she was dying.
Yeah,
that was good for him.
So different role model.
Jane, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I really think Robin pointed it out to me earlier that your book is about your life, but it's going to help a lot of people with their lives. So thank you for doing that.
I hope so. That's my mission. Thank you, Larry and Robin, very much.
The book is called Too Much of Not Enough. I found it on Amazon. Jane, do you have a website you'd like us to go to?
It's JanePollak.com, and it's Pollak. A lot of people insert a C, but it's JanePollak.com.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Jane.
My pleasure. Thanks so much.
We'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is